In the meantime, we're going to talk. I remember over the weekend, probably I thought the most important part of the State of the Nation speech, the criticism of successive new governments by David Seymour, was that New Zealand really has squandered the last 20 years in terms of its economic and its financial policy, and that we are increasingly running out of options because we're just simply not a rich country anymore. We're not growing as a country, we're not growing the economy. We are reliant upon sectors of the economy that, well, as COVID rather proved to us, like tourism, suddenly it can go pear-shaped. We are price takers on an international commodity market as well, again, which is where we draw many of our draw much of our largesse from in terms of economic gain and wealth. And he said we have to restructure our economy to make us more productive. And he puts the taxation system at the heart of that restructuring. Joining us to talk about that is the lead or the head economist at the New Zealand Initiative, Eric Crampton, and he joins us this morning. Eric, welcome to the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Eric, you would have read that speech, I'm sure, and you would have also seen the relatively detailed proposal, simple really in lots of ways, of a flatter tax structure of David Seymour and his reasons and aspirations why. Before we get into the detail of it, as a general rule, the New Zealand Initiative, would they agree with his primary criticism that we have squandered the last 20 years of productivity and economic and fiscal policy in this country?
There are some long-standing issues. Productivity gains have been fairly limited. Ultimately, that is the only source of durable wage increases. If wages outstrip productivity, then they're not going to be durable. If you want to have higher wages, a richer country, then you have to have productivity growth. But a lot of our baseline regulation and fiscal structures aren't conducive to productivity growth, particularly around land use planning. I would put that as being the first order problem. That is just too hard to build anything anywhere in this country. It's too beset by permissions and veto points and having to buy off anybody who might possibly disagree. That's a major problem. It's really holding us back. The tax system, it's better than a lot of countries, but could still stand to be improved. I'm not sure that personal income taxes would be the first place to be looking, but there are places for improvement there. Our company tax rates are very high in international comparison. That will also hinder investment. Compounded by that, we run a foreign investment regime that seems to believe that foreign investment is some prize that should be granted to, well, it starts from the presumption that international investors are just dying to put money here and that they should be made to jump through incredible hoops to be allowed to do so, rather than New Zealand companies really benefiting from foreign expertise and foreign capital in a capital poor country, and that we should be doing our utmost to try and attract it rather than make people jump through hoops. If you're making them jump through hoops, they will put their money elsewhere and New Zealand's productivity will continue to languish.
Let's just take that foreign investment bit first, Eric. I think what New Zealanders are, maybe we're just a little bit xenophobic, I'm sure we are. New Zealanders are wary of essentially, and let's personalise this, Chinese interests coming into this country and buying everything, whether it's land on farms, whether it's dairy factories, whether it's housing in Auckland. There's a belief in New Zealand that, and New Zealand First has picked it up, gosh, they've run this for nothing but short of the last 30 years, and pretty effectively too, and Labour picked it up too. There's a belief that we are going to be selling our country, or at least control of our good parts of our economy of this country, to foreign interests that are alien to New Zealand. Do you see that?
Well, I think that there remains an important role in foreign investment screening around national security concerns. You wouldn't want to wind up with a spot where, for example, a front company for the Chinese People's Liberation Army wound up owning critical infrastructure.
For example, electricity companies.
Yeah, lines, networks, water, airports, shipping ports. You wouldn't want to find out 10 years from now, oh, actually, that's owned by the People's Liberation Army, and oops, they've somehow managed to make sure that like stuff's been able to get in and out of the country that shouldn't have been able to. You don't want to have that. A national security screen remains important, but that's about all that other places do have. So if you look, for example, at the United States, a Kiwi can go to the U.S. and buy a house. Nobody's going to go and say, oh my God, these nefarious Kiwis are stealing America's houses. It just doesn't happen. You go and you buy a house. For a while during COVID, when our property prices were through the roof and we were on lockdown anyways, I kind of fantasized looking at websites in Europe where you could buy castles. You could buy a castle in Europe as a Kiwi and nobody's going to stop you. And if you did it in Portugal, they'd even give you a resident visa for having bought the castle, okay? And at the time, you could buy a castle for the price of an Auckland house. It was crazy. There weren't those restrictions. And somehow, despite that, we're not seeing, like, China going in, buying all of Europe, or, like, airlifting European historic castles back to China. It's just these fears are overblown.
So you don't think then that Chinese influx into Auckland, for example, and the purchasing of homes there, or people investing in property, because it's quite a good way to make a capital gain. It has been over the last, 10 years. You don't think that that drives up house prices for the ordinary New Zealanders?
I think the first order problem is Auckland not allowing enough building. So if you think about it this way. If Chinese buyers came in and bought every used car in New Zealand, bidding up the price of used cars, what do you think would happen next? We would start importing more used cars from Japan or wherever, and over the long run, it wouldn't make a whit of difference for the price of cars in New Zealand because we'd be able to import more cars. If we had a housing market that were as responsive, there simply couldn't be those kinds of demand effects. And what we did see after the foreign buyers ban came in was very little effect on Auckland prices. What effect there was on Auckland prices was due to changes with the Auckland Unitary Plan that allowed more building. It had nothing to do with foreign buyers. And we'd also seen that a lot of those foreign buyers were mainly transacting amongst themselves. So a fairly typical deal was a Chinese family that had bought an apartment for one of their kids who's studying at Auckland University, then selling it to another Chinese family so that their kid could live in it while studying at Auckland University. It wasn't buying up like all of Auckland. It was a lot of trade among foreign buyers themselves.